Adam couldn't believe his eyes as he stared out over his yard. A strong smell hung in the air, burning the small crowd of people's eyes as they stared. He didn't know what to say. They were all staring at him, bewildered by the sight before them. Adam felt rage bubbling deep within him. He couldn't believe what his neighbor had done. Looking into the distance, he saw the blue lights approaching. But before we start, smash the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our upcoming stories. Adam was hard at work when he first received a frantic call from his wife asking him to come home immediately. At first, he said that he couldn't, but that all changed when she told him what was going on. Adam left work immediately, not even bothering to tell his boss where he was going. He had serious business to attend to. The drive home felt like it lasted a lifetime. For the entire time, Adam sat quietly, trying to remain calm, but his blood was boiling. He couldn't believe what had happened. He asked his neighbor to mind his own business for weeks, but he didn't listen. Now everything was destroyed. When he finally reached his street, he noticed the large crowd in front of his lawn. When he pulled into his driveway, all eyes were on him. Adam had to take a deep breath before he stepped out of his car. He was furious. Why couldn't they just mind their own business? But just as he opened the door, the smell hit him. Stepping out of his car, he could see his neighbor John standing in the middle of his yard. He couldn't believe the carnage his neighbor had left for him. But things were about to get a lot worse. The second he stepped out of his car, his wife rushed out of the house to join his side. Neither of them could believe the sight before them. She was in the kitchen when it happened. She hadn't noticed until it was too late. John stood there, covered in the mess, his angry glare fixed on Adam. If only Adam had listened, none of this would have happened. He wanted to rush over and confront him, but his wife's next words stopped him. The police had been called on them. Adam Murphy lived a simple life with his wife Georgia in Orlando, Florida. They lived in a beautiful neighborhood and were lucky enough to have great neighbors among them. But there was one neighbor who Adam couldn't seem to get along with. His name was John, and he was always involving himself in the couple's business. But in recent weeks, John had found something new to complain about. It was in the middle of fall, and one large tree in Adam's yard had been causing some trouble. As they ventured deeper into the fall, the tree began to make quite a mess. Leaves and branches scattered Adam's yard, and unfortunately some had even reached John's yard. As time went on and the situation worsened, John grew tired of sweeping up the mess in his yard. He threatened to cut the tree down more than once, but Adam continuously warned him to stay away. The truth is that Adam had also grown tired of the maintenance. But he discovered something truly strange about the tree. It prevented him from cutting it down immediately. It was a Saturday morning, and Adam had just gotten home from a morning run. John was in his yard, staring at the tree with a sour expression on his face. Adam, being a decent man, decided to wave in his direction, but John wasn't so patient. He shouted that if the tree wasn't removed soon, he would go into the yard and cut it down himself. He warned John not to do that. There was no telling what might be inside. Then he turned and went into his house. Adam had been wanting to get rid of the tree, but he knew that he would have to get professionals in to deal with that problem. He never thought that his nasty neighbor John would go through with his threats. Adam had tried cutting down the tree, but he was horrified to find a strange substance inside. He knew that this was not one man's job. He would need professionals in protective gear to handle the job. John was unaware of this fact, but he would soon learn a costly lesson. But that week, something truly unexpected happened. It was Monday, just before noon, when Adam received a call from his wife. He was in the middle of a meeting and ignored the call. But when Georgia called again and again, he knew he had to answer. Something was seriously wrong, it seemed. It was a frantic call from his wife, asking him to come home immediately. At first, he said that he couldn't, but that all changed when she told him what was going on. Adam left work immediately, not even bothering to tell his boss where he was going. The drive home felt like it lasted a lifetime. For the entire time, Adam sat quietly, trying to remain calm, but his blood was boiling. He couldn't believe what had happened. For weeks, he asked his neighbor to mind his own business, but he didn't listen. When he finally reached his street, he noticed the large crowd in front of his lawn. When he pulled into his driveway, all eyes were on him. Adam had to take a deep breath before he stepped out of his car. But just as he opened the door, the smell hit him. The smell was potent and sickening. Adam felt like he was going to pass out as he stepped onto the sidewalk. He looked out over his yard, his heart breaking when he saw the tree. It had been cut in two and now liquid was pouring from it. His grass was covered by thick, brown slime. He was mortified. Adam could only imagine what this would do to his yard. He was afraid. Surely he wouldn't be able to get away with this. First, he needed time to think about what he would do next. His eyes drifted to the crowd beside him. Mothers and fathers stood with their children glaring at Adam. Did they know what he had done? His palms were sweating. He was furious that this had happened and couldn't stand the thought of being watched while dealing with it. He told them to go home, insisting it had nothing to do with them. But they didn't listen. Nathan, one of the neighbors, shouted back that they weren't going anywhere. The smell was spreading into their homes, making it their problem too. Adam didn't have the strength to deal with this right now. He was ignoring the elephant in the middle of his yard, pretending that he didn't even notice the man's eyes on him. He would deal with him soon. Adam wanted to chase his nosy neighbors away, but it was hopeless. Even if he got them to back off, he knew they would be watching from their windows. If only his neighbor had listened to him, he would have been able to get away with this for at least a few more weeks. But now the secret he was very aware of was on full display to his neighbors. He didn't know what the law around it was, but he was confident that he was in deep trouble. He just hoped they could solve the problem without getting the police involved. He had been hiding a terrible secret, and he worried that the police wouldn't take too kindly to it. He could see his neighbor John standing in the middle of his yard. Couldn't believe the carnage his neighbor had left for him, but things were about to get a lot worse. The second he took a step closer to his yard, his wife rushed out of the house to join his side. Neither of them could believe the sight before them. Georgia struggled to hold back tears as she stood beside her husband, her voice shaky with worry. Adam pulled her close, trying to comfort her, though he felt just as afraid. They had hoped they had more time before facing this situation, but now their yard was a mess and nothing felt the same. Georgia feared John would call the police, and though Adam agreed it was likely, he had no idea what consequences they might face. Georgia let out a shaky cry beside her husband. It was supposed to be a good day, but their neighbor had destroyed everything. He found the truth they had been trying to conceal. But what was pouring out of the tree? As neighbors stared at them, it was obvious that they were being judged. This was a big deal to Adam and Georgia, and having their entire street staring at them was only making it 1,000 times worse. Their beloved tree had been cut, and the thick, gooey liquid was pouring from it. Their grass was drowning in the substance. The smell was worse than he ever could have imagined. He told his neighbor to back off, but for his own selfish reasons he went against Adam's wishes. Adam wasn't the type to hate people, but John had taken it way too far. They had spoken about this. He asked him to leave the tree alone, but John was selfish. Georgia noticed the way her husband's shoulders tensed as he looked at the man. His wife had been in the kitchen when it happened and hadn't noticed until it was too late. John stood there, covered in the disgusting mess, his furious glare locked on Adam. It was still pouring from the tree, and it wouldn't stop anytime soon. Adam noticed that it wasn't being absorbed into the ground. It was too thick. How would he ever get it off of his yard? He was seconds from having a meltdown. If only he had listened to him, then none of this would have happened. Adam wanted to storm over there and confront him, but his wife's words stopped him in his tracks. She urged him to stop, insisting that if they handled the situation carefully, John might not involve the police. They could get into serious trouble, and they had to try to prevent that. He forced himself to step back, keeping his distance from John. If he got any closer, he might lose control. He needed time to cool down. But time was already slipping away. From across the yard, John's smug voice cut through the tension. He had already called the police. His heart dropped. There was nothing they could do about this anymore. The damage was done, and Adam was going to have to deal with the consequences whether he wanted to or not. He feared for what would happen to him and his wife. When he learned the disturbing truth about the tree in his backyard, he was ordered to do something about it immediately, but he didn't. Could they arrest him for it? It was a massive safety risk, and all of their neighbors were beyond angry about it. Certainly they weren't going to let Adam and Georgia get away with this, right? Georgia clung to her husband, tears streaming down her face and soaking her shirt. Fear filled her voice as she trembled in his arms. Adam wanted to turn to her and comfort her, but he found himself frozen in place. What if he was charged with putting people's lives in danger? Whatever was inside the tree smelled terrible. He could only imagine what kinds of diseases the substance carried. Neighbors were whispering among themselves, some talking to their sleeves to prevent the awful stench from overwhelming them. When Adam looked at John, he noticed the disgusted look on his face. He was up to his ankles in the liquid, his shoes completely ruined. Adam felt rage bubbling deep within him. He couldn't believe what his neighbor had done. Looking into the distance, he saw the red and blue lights approaching. What was he supposed to tell the police? He didn't have an explanation for this. He knew that he should have handled the situation a long time ago. Would he get in trouble for being too busy? As the officer arrived, John stepped forward, claiming Adam's tree had been making a mess in his yard for weeks. He pointed to a small pile of leaves and twigs, but the officer's attention quickly shifted to the much larger mess in Adam's yard. John admitted he had taken matters into his own hands, entering Adam's property to cut the tree down. However, he hadn't expected the rotting tree to release a disgusting liquid. The officer questioned whether John had permission to do so, and when John admitted he didn't, Adam realized his neighbor had made a huge mistake. The officer made it clear that John was the one who had vandalized property, not Adam. Adam then explained that the tree had been dying since last winter due to rainwater collecting inside. He had been in the process of hiring contractors to remove it but hadn't set a date yet. Understanding the situation, the officer ruled in Adam's favor, ordering John to pay for the damage he had caused by trespassing and cutting the tree without permission. By the end of the week, the tree was removed, and in the months that followed, John learned to stay out of other people's business. In the end, Adam and Georgia walked away as the real winners. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories.